A white woman yells at a black passenger, "Move! This isn't your seat. You don't belong here." But seconds later, her arrogance was destroyed when he calmly exposed who he really was. When Marcus Reed, a sharply dressed black entrepreneur, stepped toward his assigned seat, he stopped cold. A blonde woman in oversized sunglasses lounged in it, legs crossed, designer handbag on the side table, as if the space belonged to her. "This must be a mistake," Marcus said, holding up his boarding pass. The woman didn't flinch. She slid her glasses down the bridge of her nose, gave him a quick, dismissive scan, and smirked. "Leave," she said smoothly, her voice dripping with entitlement. "Before I call the cops," gasps rose from nearby passengers. A flight attendant froze mid-step. "And Marcus?" He didn't raise his voice. Didn't flinch. He only leaned forward, lips curling into a calm, devastating smile. "You should know something," he said quietly enough for only her and the stunned passengers nearest to hear. "I own this airline." The woman's blood ran cold. Marcus Reed wasn't born into wealth. He came from the south side of Chicago, where broken streetlights flickered at night, and the only thing more common than potholes were people telling you what you couldn't do. His mother worked 2 jobs, nursing during the day, cleaning offices at night, while his father, a mechanic, taught Marcus that respect was earned with grit, not demanded with titles. Marcus absorbed both lessons. He grew up knowing that the world wouldn't hand him anything. But if he wanted something badly enough, if he was willing to outwork and outthink everyone else, he could carve out his own space. That drive carried him through college, where he studied business on a scholarship. He worked nights stacking boxes at a shipping company, using breaks to sketch out ideas for the logistics app that would one day make him his first million. By 32, he had sold that app, reinvested everything into aviation technology, and built what skeptics laughed at in the beginning, Apex Airways. Apex wasn't just an airline. It was Marcus's vision of travel reimagined, customer first, tech-driven, luxurious without being wasteful. In less than a decade, it became one of the fastest-growing airlines in the world. But tonight, Marcus wasn't boarding as CEO Marcus Reed. He wasn't here for press or attention. He wanted to experience what his passengers experienced, quietly, anonymously. That was why he wore jeans instead of a tailored suit, a cap instead of a watch worth 6 figures. What he didn't know was that his disguise wouldn't just hide his wealth. It would invite an insult so blatant, so dripping with entitlement, that the entire cabin would witness the moment arrogance collided with power. The flight to London was a red-eye, and the cabin hummed with quiet anticipation. Passengers shuffled into first class, settling into lie-flat seats that promised comfort for the 8-hour journey. Attendants offered champagne flutes, crisp menus, and warm smiles. Marcus slipped in unnoticed, holding only a small leather carry-on. He didn't believe in traveling heavy. Efficiency was his brand. He walked down the aisle, ticket in hand. Seat 2A. A perfect spot by the window, with enough privacy to disappear into his thoughts. But when he reached the row, his steps slowed. There she was, a blonde woman, probably in her late 30s, draped across his seat as if she owned it. Sunglasses hid her eyes, but the tilt of her chin, the expensive beige blazer, and the blood-red Birkin bag on the counter beside her all screamed untouchable. Marcus frowned slightly, double-checked his ticket, then leaned in politely. "Excuse me," he said, voice calm but firm. "I believe you're in my seat." She didn't look up, just raised one finger, the universal sign of wait. Marcus blinked. He had built a company from nothing, negotiated billion-dollar deals, but here he was, standing in an aisle, treated like an interruption. Finally, with an exaggerated sigh, the woman lowered her phone. She slid her sunglasses down and looked him over. Her eyes flicked from his sneakers to his cap, dismissing him in less than a second. "This must be some kind of mistake," she said smoothly. "This is first class." Marcus kept his cool. "Yes," he said, holding up the boarding pass. "Seat 2A." She barely glanced at the ticket before smirking. No, you don't understand. People like you don't usually sit here." The words dropped like lead. A couple across the aisle shifted uncomfortably. The businessman in 2B peeked over his laptop. Marcus's jaw tightened. People like me? The woman shrugged, feigning innocence. I just mean, it's not common. These seats are reserved months in advance. Maybe you were upgraded? Coach is back there. She pointed behind her, lips curled into a condescending smile. Marcus didn't flinch. He simply repeated, slower this time, "This is my seat." But instead of moving, she leaned forward, her voice sharp now. Look, I don't want to cause a scene. Why don't you save us both the trouble and find a flight attendant before this gets ugly? Marcus's eyes locked on hers, calm, cold, patient. I'll give you one chance to move. Her smirk widened. Or what? You'll call the cops? She laughed loud enough for others to hear. No, I'll call the cops. You don't belong here. The cabin froze. Every ear tuned in, though eyes tried not to stare. A mother whispered to her teenage son, "Just keep reading, honey." The businessman muttered, "Unbelievable," under his breath. Two young women in row 3 exchanged looks of disgust. The flight attendant finally approached, face tight with nervous professionalism. "Is there a problem here?" she asked softly. "Yes," the woman snapped before Marcus could speak. "This man is harassing me. He's trying to take my seat." The attendant blinked, eyes darting to Marcus, then to his boarding pass. She hesitated. The cabin was watching. If she made the wrong move, she'd fuel either entitlement or outrage. Marcus said nothing. He simply held his boarding pass higher, calm as stone. The attendant swallowed. "Sir, if you'll just wait a moment." "No," Marcus interrupted, his tone cutting but not loud. "This doesn't need more time. It needs the truth." The woman crossed her arms, smug again. "Leave before the cops come." Marcus tilted his head. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then he leaned closer, his voice low but sharp as glass. "You should know something," he said. "I own this airline." The words sliced through the air. Passengers gasped. The businessman's laptop snapped shut. The two young women in row 3 covered their mouths. The flight attendant's eyes widened in horror. And the woman, the smugness drained from her face like water from a cracked glass. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The sting of the confrontation lingered in the cabin long after the flight attendant quietly reassigned the woman to a different seat. Marcus finally sat down in 2A, calm as ever, but the air around him buzzed with unspoken questions. Passengers stole glances. Whispers passed between rows. Everyone had heard the words that shifted the atmosphere. "I own this airline." It wasn't long before curiosity overcame hesitation. The businessman across the aisle leaned slightly closer, his laptop forgotten. "Excuse me, Mr. Reed," he said in a respectful tone. "I don't mean to intrude, but you really own Apex Airways?" Marcus gave a small smile. "Yes, Apex was my idea and my responsibility." "Still is." That simple confirmation opened the floodgates. The young couple from row 3 leaned forward eagerly. "How did you do it?" the woman asked. "How do you go from nothing to owning an airline?" Marcus took a breath, leaning back in his seat. He wasn't a man who enjoyed boasting. But this moment wasn't about ego, it was about perspective. "I started with nothing," he began. "I grew up on the south side of Chicago. My mother worked 2 jobs, my father was a mechanic. They gave me everything they could, but the world, it didn't give me much in return. I was told no more times than I could count." His voice was steady, not bitter. He spoke like a man remembering scars that had healed into lessons. "I had an idea while I was in college, a logistics app to help companies track shipments more efficiently. I worked nights stacking boxes, saved every dollar, and coded that app during my breaks. At first, nobody cared." Investors laughed. "Said I didn't look like someone who could make it work." Several passengers nodded knowingly, recognizing the weight behind his words. But I kept pushing. 1,000 no's before one yes. That yes changed everything. I sold the app, reinvested the money, and bet everything on aviation technology. People thought I was crazy. They said the airline industry was too big, too expensive, too locked down. But I saw opportunity where they saw obstacles. The businessman leaned in, fascinated. "And that became Apex?" Marcus nodded. "I built Apex to prove that travel could be different, fair, customer-focused, efficient. We cut costs where they didn't matter and invested where they did. Comfort, safety, respect. In 10 years, we went from one leased jet to a global fleet. A hush fell over the cabin. It wasn't just admiration, it was respect. His words carried the weight of battles fought and won. Behind them, in her reassigned seat, the blonde woman sat rigid, staring out the window. Every word Marcus spoke echoed in her ears, louder than the engines. His story wasn't just about success. It was about resilience, dignity, and persistence. And for her, each sentence was a mirror, a reflection of the arrogance she had displayed, the assumptions she had made. Shame burned hotter with every mile, until she couldn't decide which was worse, the embarrassment of being exposed, or the lesson she could no longer ignore. The cabin had settled into a rhythm. Dinner trays were cleared, lights dimmed, and the quiet hum of the engines filled the silence. Marcus reclined slightly, eyes closed, not asleep but lost in thought. His story had rippled through the cabin, and though most passengers had returned to their own routines, the respect in the air lingered like an invisible current. But in row 4, one passenger hadn't found peace. The woman, her seat reassigned after the confrontation, sat rigid, her hands gripping her red handbag as if it were a lifeline. For hours, she replayed the moment in her head, each word Marcus had spoken chipping away at her confidence. His calmness, his dignity, his undeniable success, they contrasted so sharply with her arrogance that the shame burned hotter the longer she sat. Finally, unable to bear it, she rose. Her heels clicked softly against the aisle carpet as she made her way forward. Passengers noticed, some glancing up, others pretending not to, curious to see what would unfold next. She stopped at Marcus's seat, her voice low, stripped of its earlier sharpness. I want to apologize," she whispered. Marcus opened his eyes, his expression unreadable. He studied her for a long moment before speaking. "For the seat?" His voice was calm, deliberate. Then, with a tilt of his head, he added, "Or for assuming I didn't belong in it?" Her cheeks flushed a deep crimson. The mask of entitlement she had worn earlier was gone, replaced by something raw, embarrassment, even vulnerability. "Both," she admitted, her voice trembling. Marcus leaned back, still composed. He didn't rush to accept her apology, didn't offer her the easy way out. Instead, he let silence sit between them, heavy and instructive. Then he spoke, his tone measured. "You know, the seat wasn't the problem," he said. "Seats can be reassigned. That happens every day. But respect?" His gaze held hers firmly. Respect shouldn't have to be. Her eyes dropped instantly, unable to meet his. The words pierced deeper than any public humiliation could. Respect. That was what she had stripped from him without thought, without hesitation. "I was wrong," she murmured. "I judged you before I knew anything about you. I saw what I wanted to see." Marcus studied her a moment longer. "You saw what you chose to see," he corrected gently but firmly. "And that choice matters. Because every time you assume, every time you dismiss someone based on your prejudice, you don't just hurt them, you diminish yourself." The woman swallowed hard. Around them, passengers pretended not to listen, but their stillness betrayed their attention. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said finally, "but I needed to say it. I needed you to know I was wrong." Marcus gave the faintest nod. Not absolution, not condemnation, just acknowledgement. "It's not about what I know," he replied. "It's about what you'll do differently next time." She stood there for another moment, then quietly retreated down the aisle, her posture smaller, her steps slower. For the first time that night, she looked less like someone clinging to power and more like someone who had learned just how fragile power was without respect to back it. The wheels touched down with a soft jolt, and a collective exhale rippled through the cabin. Seatbelts clicked open, overhead bins creaked, and passengers prepared to step into a new city. Marcus sat patiently, waiting his turn. When the aisle finally cleared, he rose, collected his leather bag, and moved with the same calm stride he had carried onto the plane. "Thank you for flying with us." "Mr. Reed," whispered a flight attendant as he passed. It was subtle, respectful, but tinged with awe. Marcus smiled, gave her a nod, and walked into the jet bridge without fanfare. Behind him, however, the woman fidgeted. She had stayed unusually quiet for the remainder of the flight, her earlier bravado stripped away, but as she followed the line of passengers out, her nerves returned. She clutched her red handbag tighter, her eyes darting nervously toward Marcus's retreating figure. When she reached the gate, 2 uniformed staff members were waiting. Their professionalism was sharp, polite, but unmistakably firm. "Ms. Clark?" one of them asked. She straightened, forcing a brittle smile. "Yes?" The attendant's voice was calm, almost gentle. "Per Apex Airways Code of Respect, your behavior earlier today violated our passenger conduct standards. Effective immediately, you will be placed on a 1-year no-fly list with Apex." Her jaw dropped, color draining from her face. "You can't be serious," she sputtered. "It was a misunderstanding. I was tired, stressed. This is ridiculous." Passengers streamed past, some stealing knowing glances. A few even smirked, recognizing the justice in motion. Down the terminal, Marcus paused. He turned just enough for his voice to carry across the space. Calm. Final. "Seats can be reassigned," he said, his words steady as a verdict. "Respect should never be." The statement hung in the air like a closing gavel. Then he walked on, blending into the crowd, leaving only the echo of his lesson behind. The woman stood frozen, her protests stuck in her throat. For once, there was no seat, no handbag, no entitlement to shield her. Only the weight of her choices and the truth that she had just learned the hardest way possible